Hey, in this video, which I call Beginnings, I talk about how various items and activities come into existence over a long period of time, according to various myths. Um, this is a little different, kind of like creation stories, but instead of dealing with a period of time where there was emptiness, and then the earth came into existence, and the heavens came into existence. I'm talking about longer periods of time in which things happen more slowly over extended periods. I mean, we know we're familiar with the creation story from Greek mythology, but there's also, according to Hesiod and his Works and Days, he talks about more extended periods of time, these different ages. There's the Golden Age where things are wonderful, but then things get really crappy with the arrival of the Silver Age and the Bronze Age and the Heroic Age, and finally the age we're living in, the Iron Age, which is the shittiest age. I'm only going to talk about. I usually like to talk about at least 3 myths, but in this video I'm just going to keep it down to 2 because they're a little lengthy and I don't want to make this video too long. The first one is from Ireland. It's part of Celtic mythology. The Irish have a book called the Book of Invasions of Ireland. Scholars call this the invasion cycle of Celtic mythology, of Irish mythology to be specific, or sometimes it's called the mythological cycle. Basically, when Ireland came into existence, there was nobody on it. It was totally empty. And but then there arrived this woman named Kesser with her husband. And being that these myths have been very Christianized, she was related to, I think, Noah and his family. So this was just before the flood, in the biblical flood. So she arrives in Ireland with 50 women and 3 men. And they're thinking, hey, this is virgin land. Why don't we reproduce and populate the place? But then suddenly 2 of the men die. And the last man, whose name is Fintan, he's got to do the job all himself of helping to populate the land, and with 50 women. You'd think he'd be happy, but he runs away and hides in a cave. Then the flood comes and kills everybody, except Fintan. He turns into a salmon and lives for a very long time and witnesses all the different peoples that come into Ireland. And every time there's a new arrival, he changes into a different animal and he witnesses. And that's how we know about the invasion cycle, because he saw it. He saw all of it. Anyway, so then after them came the followers of Partholon. They're known as the Partholonians, and they came into Ireland, and the place was very clogged with plants and trees, and so they cleared away land, made it habitable. Lakes started coming into existence. They found a way to brew beer. Awesome. But then they had to fight these mysterious monsters called the Mauryans. They're described in various ways. Sometimes they're beautiful, many times they're ugly. They're associated with the dark of the deep waters. Sometimes they remind me a little bit of Lovecraft's Deep Ones. So they do battle with these Mauryans, and they win, and things are going well for a while, but then a plague comes and they all die. So, after that, after Ireland is not habited for a while, there's this other group of beings that come, and the next ones are referred to as the followers of Nemed, known as the Nemedians. And when they arrive, they do some of the stuff that the Partholonians did. They clear away some forests, more lakes come into existence, and they too get stuck fighting the Mauryans. There's some battles, they win some, they lose some, but then eventually they get badly defeated. But there are some survivors, and they wind up leaving Ireland. Over a long period of time, there's 2 groups, there's 2 descendants of the Nemedians. One group of descendants are referred to as the Fearbolgs. the men of the bag. According to one interpretation, they arrived to Ireland with huge bags of dirt on their back to help make Ireland more fertile. So they arrived, and they too made some changes in Ireland. What they did was they divided it geographically. We know today that Ireland is broken into these groups. We have Ulster in the north, we have Connacht, Leinster, and we have Munster in the south. Munster is sometimes broken into two parts also. And we owe that to the Firbolgs. Now, the Firbolgs are living happily in Ireland, but then there's these other descendants of the Nemedians. They're very different. They come into Ireland, but unlike all the previous invaders, instead of coming by boat, they come in a cloud that descends. And they're bright and beautiful, and they have wisdom and magic, and they have these magical items, a sword and a spear and a stone and a cauldron that keeps making food of its own. And these are the gods of Ireland. They're referred to as the tribe of the goddess Danu, Odena. In Gaelic, it's something like Tuatha De Danann. And they arrive, and they meet the Firbolgs there, and they get into a little war. The gods win, but they allow the Firbolgs, the survivors of the war, to live in a certain area in Ireland, to live in peace. This is sometimes referred to as the First Battle of Mortar. Now, the gods are living happily for a while, but lo and behold, guess who else they have to fight now? The dreadful Mauryans. We haven't forgotten about those. And in a more famous battle called the Second Battle of Mortar, in a tremendous battle, they crush the Fomorians, and the gods now have possession of Ireland. But that's not the end. From Spain, supposedly, there arrived some people referred to as the Sons of Mil, known as the Malaysians. Guess who they are? They're us. They're regular humans. And they arrive in Ireland, and they come across the gods, the Tuatha De Danann, and they get into a fight with the gods. Now you're thinking, yeah, you can't fight a god. Well, Irish mythology is its own creature, and maybe due to the Christianization of the literature, the gods might be gods, but the humans are saved. So the humans actually win. They beat the gods. But instead of kicking the gods out or giving them a part of the land off to the side, like the gods did with the Firbolgs, they divided Ireland in half. But instead of dividing it in half this way, they did it this way. The humans live on the top of the land, and the gods live kind of underneath it. They live in the hills, in the lakes, in the prehistoric burial chambers, and the gods live there. And over time, they are remembered as the fairies of Ireland, which is why the fairy faith is very strong in Ireland. It's believed that these were once the gods that ruled over Ireland. So, for now, that's the end of the myth I have from Ireland. Now, which one do I want to do next? I was thinking about doing, well, I have some others here, but I think I'm going to do, my other big story is going to be from the Persian Book of Kings, the Shanameh. When Persia was young, there was a king called Kayamars. And Kayamars, they were all living in a type of Stone Age. They dug up roots from the ground, and Kayamars was this really good king, and they everybody dressed in, furs, supposedly. But then In Persian mythology, there's a lot of demons. There's spirits of good and spirits of evil, and it's part of the pre-Islamic belief in duality of light and dark. Spirits of light, spirits of darkness, and the spirits of darkness, headed by a black demon, has a war with the Persians and kills the son of Mars. But the Persians rally, and with the help of another leader by the name of the grandson of Mars, named Husheng, they defeat the black demon and his followers. And Husheng becomes king, and the people live in sort of a new realm of happiness. So they evolve. They instead of digging roots, they grow crops. Husheng finds a way to to work with metals, so he takes them out of the Stone Age, and they make metals. One day he's riding along, and there's he comes across some sort of dragon or something, and he throws a stone at it, and it winds up hitting another rock, and he sees a spark, and he discovers fire. So Husheng gives them fire and metals and all that stuff. After the reign of Husheng, there's another great leader called Tamaris. Now Tamaris is called the Demon Binder. He's such a virtuous king that demons actually come to him, and not to cause trouble, but to tell him, please don't kill us. We'll be good. We'll teach you all kinds of things. So that's all I have to say about Tamaris. Then comes Jamshid. Jamshid is kind of, he's the head of this golden age. Persia now gets into this golden age. There's spinning and weaving. People no longer wear skins. They wear nice clothes, and so forth. But this age is about to come to an end because, like a lot of these religious sort of stories, Jamshid becomes proud and arrogant, and that's the beginning of his downfall. And there's this evil being called Zahak, and Zahak he's got this interesting characteristic. He's got a serpent coming out of each shoulder, and these serpents could only survive by eating the brains of young men. And in a battle, Zahak defeats Jamshid, and Jamshid surrenders to the evil Zahak. But Zahak is not happy simply having Jamshid surrender. He kills him by literally sawing him in half. Yeah. So then there's this evil rule by Zahak for many years, but don't worry, it eventually comes to an end, and there's going to be another good ruler, and that's all I have to say about that. I said I'm just going to do two, but you know what? I lied. I think I'm going to do the third one, make this video a little longer. This is the Chinese story of the origin of many things. There was a giant in China called Pangu, and one day he sort of blew up and became the earth and the sky and the rivers and the mountains and the sun and the moon and everything. And kind of like in Norse mythology, the myth of Ymir, who is a giant that becomes the earth and the sky and everything. So now there's a beautiful earth, but there's nobody living on it, until there's a goddess named Nuwa that comes and visits. And but she's lonely, so she makes people. So she crafts them out of the clay, and she teaches them to walk and talk and everything. But then she gets tired of making them. They take a long time to make. So she gets some sort of leather strap, and runs it through the mud and flings the mud here and there and creates more people that way. They're inferior, but there's more people now. But then they start dying off, and she's like, I got to think of a fast way to make more people. Oh, I know. I'll teach them about sex. You think she would have done this in the beginning, but, you know, anyway. So she teaches them about sex, and they reproduce on their own, and then she goes away. By the way, Nuwa is an interesting goddess. She's sometimes pictured as a head with a serpent body attached. Now, after Nuwa, her husband, well, sometimes he's called her husband, comes to the land, and he's called Fushi. Fuxi teaches humans to fish and hunt and make nets, and he teaches them the trigrams, the lines that are 3 in a row, and depending they represent different things depending on if the lines are straight or broken. Usually there's 8 trigrams, as they're called, and they're pictured surrounding a yin-yang symbol. So Fuxi is associated with that. After Fuxi, there's humans, there's hunting, there's fishing, things are going well. But then there's these 2 gods that don't like each other, and they got into a war. There's the god of the water called Gong, and then there's the god of fire called Jurong. The 2 of them get into a fight, and the god of fire wins. And Gong, the god of water, he is so pissed off, he decides to bash his head into a mountain. And it turns out this mountain was sort of in the northwest, holding up the heavens. There's mountains holding up the heavens, and this mountain was sort of in the northwest, holding up that part of the heavens. And because that mountain was smashed, that part of the earth kind of creaked up a little bit, and that's how come the rivers sort of run easterly in China. That's the explanation. So the world is in a disaster because of this tilt that took place. But then Nuwa, the goddess, returns, and she patches things up and makes things better. But the world is still a little tilted, and the rivers run in an easterly direction. Then after that comes Shennong. Now Shennong is, whereas Fuxi taught people how to hunt and fish, Shennong is the agriculture god, and he's associated with health and medicine, and he teaches people agriculture. Now after Shennong comes another very interesting figure called the Great Yu. Now, when the Great Yu comes into being, the world is in a state of a flood. There's water all over the place, and Yu decides to get rid of the floodwaters, and he does this with the help of this mold, this soil, where if you throw it in water, it expands and soaks up the water magically. And with the help of a dragon and a tortoise, he's riding on the back of a dragon. The dragon is digging its tail in the soil, so the waters have a place to go and make rivers. And also Yu is riding alongside a turtle, and the turtle has this magical mold on its back. So Yu's riding along, throwing the mold all over the place, soaking up the water, and the dragon's tail is digging a ditch along while he's riding, and the waters are going into rivers. The Great Yu also can change himself into a bear and dig up caves and help make mountains, and this also channels the water into lakes and rivers and seas, and so he's this great hydraulic engineer, and people can now live because water is now under control. But that's not enough. He founds the very first dynasty called the Shia Dynasty. And so out of this chaos comes this order, the very first dynasty called the Shia Dynasty. The Shia Dynasty is interesting because it's it's the very first dynasty of China, but it's partly mythical. There's a lot we don't really know. Historians, things have more historical footing in the next dynasty called the Shang Dynasty. But when I was in China and visiting museums, there were various artifacts that were there, and they said that it dated back to the Shia Dynasty. So, to some extent, there is some historical validity to the Shia Dynasty. So we have a giant that blew up, made the earth. Humans are made. They learn how to hunt and fish and cook and then lo and behold, there's a flood, and it's made livable, and that's the end of the origin myth of China. I have some books here. In my other videos, you could see other books that you could check out different books that exist, that you could read all the stuff. But for now, I'll give you just a few that I use for this video. For Ireland, I have Myths and Legends of the Celts by James MacKillop. For Persian mythology, there's many versions of the Shanameh, the Book of Kings, the great epic of Persia. But for this little video, I have a young reader's version, Tales of Ancient Persia by Barbara Leonie Picard. A more sophisticated book on Persia is by Vesta Sarkhosh Kurdish, called Persian Myths. And I'm gonna put these in the description down below. And for China, I have another young person's version of Chinese myths. It's by the Oxford Myths and Legends, Chinese Myths and Fantasies by Cyril Birch. This is a cute little story for younger readers. And here's another one for younger readers, Chinese Mythology, Stories of Creation and Invention by Claude, Helft. And again, this is for younger readers. If you want more sophisticated adult books, you could check out my other videos that talk about books on mythology. Thank you for listening.